Hello everyone and welcome back to Rare Japanese Sounds. I apologize for the suboptimal setup, it's just that we are moving things around here, but I just wanted to take this video as an opportunity to talk to you about something I have not been doing as much as I should, and it's to talk about the general world of collectibles right now, because a lot of things are happening way outside of the realm of collecting Japanese records. And when talking about it, you might understand how this affects the prices of the records that we are currently trying to buy. I also wanted to take the example of what's happening right now as well as a reason why you should be careful about investing in things such as Japanese records. That's why I took two albums that I bought very recently, and I will be explaining why I think they have very different profiles, even though both are probably in the top 50 of the most popular Japanese records to invest in. So, as you may or may not know, the world of collectibles right now is in a period of growth that has never been seen before. Everything from sports cards to comic books to video games to Pokemon cards even, everything is growing at a rate that is quite incredible. And of course, that is due to a number of factors. I think we've discussed them on this channel, but to recap, we are both in a period of economic uncertainty, with traditional assets like stocks being at a all-time high, despite the fact that we are in an economic recession. And people are quite scared. I mean, ordinary people are quite scared by the disparity between the actual situation and the fact that stocks are still so high. So this, combined with the fact that people go out less and have more disposable income that they have instead of spending on travels, etc. This combination of factors made people somehow spend everything on stuff that they can buy on the internet, and collectibles have been one of that. And you can definitely see a correlation between the start of the pandemic and a huge increase in prices for collectibles. Of course, CD Pop has also been affected by the situation, but not as much clearly as some of the other collectibles. If you look at the prices, for instance, of Pokemon cards, like you've seen 10, 20 times increases in a period of just 6 months, whereas CD Pop, it's much less than that. Maybe for This Boy by Hiroshi Sado, a 30% increase, but not much more than that. And that is despite the fact that it's extremely easy to manipulate the prices of Japanese records. The supply is so low, it would only take so little effort to do that, that I'm pretty happy that that kind of thing is not happening yet. So this is the global situation that we're in now. And where do Japanese records play a role in all that? Well, let's look at just records in general. The fact is, despite representing an industry that is older than any of the other collectibles you can think of, like music is one of the oldest forms of art that we have. And despite that, the current market for vinyl records and music media as general, but vinyl records are of course the main one in that. The market for them is incredibly small in terms of total value compared to things like sports card. Of course, you can make the argument that you have such a variety of vinyl records, like you have millions of different vinyl records that exist, that it's normal that the prices aren't as high for individual items as they would be for sports card. But if you think about it, like sports cards are just cards that depict people playing a game, like it doesn't represent the game itself. When you talk about vinyl records, you actually have the music, you actually have the album. And I think that there is so much intrinsic value to having that the prices should be high, at least higher than they are. If you look at the top 20 most expensive records sold on Discogs for the past few months, it's pretty easy to enter. If you buy a record that's worth a couple of grand, you are in the top 20, but you would never be able to enter the top 20 in sports card. You would need to spend at least $20,000 to be like in the top 20 sold that month. That's just to say that despite just the width of the vinyl record market, because there is such, like the amount of choice that you have is incredible, still I think we should see higher prices for top items. And I think we are way behind other collectibles in terms of the potential for certain records in particular. But I also want to invite everyone to exercise caution, especially now that we are headed in a time of big price increases. It has happened for many other collectibles, so Do not be surprised if you see extreme price spikes for city pop albums. For instance, if you saw last week's video, we were looking at an auction for Magical, and I was saying, okay, maybe I will bid 40 to 45,000 yen. I was expecting probably the price to be in the 50s to 60,000 range, but the actual price that the auction ended up at was something above 150,000 yen. And this is the exact type of price spike that we would be expecting in like the situation that other collectibles are exposed to. And with that in mind, do not be surprised if you see very volatile prices in the very near future for similar records, especially the more popular ones. So do not be surprised if you see a copy of this boy ending for, let's say, $300, $400. It's the kind of thing that happens in these markets. But there is one big difference between the market of Japanese records, at least most Japanese records that are popular today, and other well-established collectibles and antiques in general. Japanese records that are popular now have not been popular for a very long time. 5 years ago, this boy was a $30 to $40 record. Now it's a $100 to $150 record. For that reason, it takes a long time for the supply to just hit the markets, because vinyl records are something that are in most people's collection. Most people back in the day bought vinyl records. Of course, most of them didn't buy this. They bought the albums in the top 50. It's increasingly unlikely that people would buy something that is decreasingly popular. It's pretty weird the way I'm phrasing it, but my point is that more people have this than you imagine. Even if it's a small run record, it's very easy for a record like that to have a few tens of thousands of copies. That's a lot. It's just that you see them trickling onto the markets at a very slow rate, and that's how we manage to have a price that is so high. The demand would never be able to stand having maybe the supply hit the market at 10 times the price. Let's do a thought experiment together. Let's imagine that right now the price of this boy grows from $100 to $10,000. Now most people, something like that would probably hit the news. A pretty popular record that many people have at home hitting this kind of price would probably make the national news, and you would probably have hundreds of people at the same time discovering that their one vinyl record is suddenly worth the price of a car, and you would have people selling it, and you will have extreme efforts put to find this record and put it on the market. For that reason, you can't have a record like that move in price too much. It just doesn't work. And you need to be prepared that the longer an album stays at a high price, the more downward push you have for people to find their copy of the record in the collection and to put it on the market. You need to have such a steady demand from just people interested in the album to make the price not go away. I'm pretty skeptical that the album would stay at $100 just for such a long time. Of course, it doesn't matter to me because I just enjoy the music. I don't care about buying the album for a high price. I just want it, and I don't care if it retraces 30-40%. In the end, it all comes down to what makes music popular and how does music stay popular in the long run. For instance, you have things like Elvis memorabilia or the Beatles memorabilia. Those people were hugely relevant back in the day, but are they still as relevant in 2020? Will they be still as relevant in 2100? It's very hard to tell. And that's why it's more important to focus on the actual music rather than the actual societal phenomenon that you can have. For instance, Plastic Love is the definition of music that is popular for the phenomenon rather than just the pure musical quality itself. And actually, that is why I brought not only this boy by Hiroshi Sato next to me, but also Still Way by Satoshi Ashikawa. Now, those are two very different albums musically. It just happens that for some reason they became popular at the same time and to very similar audiences. Normally, albums like that would have their own niche in front, among different kinds of people who listen to music. It just happened that the general rare Japanese music has become popular to Western audience pretty wide, and even albums that are, not meant for a large audience. Still Way was not a very well-selling record. But it happens that people like me are both attracted to pop albums and ambient albums. But there is one big difference. Even though the supply on the market is, okay, it's not exactly similar because you do have more copies of this boy hitting the market than Still Way. But the actual number of copies existing, I'm sure, in people's home must be much lower for Still Way than this boy. And you have a few reasons for that. For instance, Still Way is an ambient album. There is no way it's sold the same as this kind of pop album, which was marketed for everyone. People saw the ads on TV, they go to the record shop and say, oh, this is like the ad I saw on TV, I like the music, I'm going to buy the album made of the songs from the commercials. That was basically the reasoning for people to buy the album. On the other hand, to buy Still Way, I don't know how you would manage to buy an album like that. You would have to be pretty into like niche types of music. You would have to be into new age music, ambience and all that, and you would have to, well, discover this artist, no previous albums. So I think you see my point here. The fact is you have much fewer copies of Still Way existing than this boy, even though on the markets they are pretty much similar scarcities. Now moving on to my next point, it is that Still Way was already pretty expensive 5 years ago, much more so than this boy. So 5 years ago, people were already digging into their collection and trying to find their copy of Still Way to put on the market. So for a much longer period of time, you've had people paying high prices for their copies of Still Way, which means the market for Still Way is much better established than the market for this boy. It doesn't mean, of course, that this boy won't become a $1,000 record, and doesn't mean that Still Way will always stay at its current like $300 price. But it does mean that it is much less likely that Still Way will go down rather than this boy. And that's what you have to be really careful in the long run. For instance, Tatsuro Imashita's albums are the perfect example of that. It's just that the supply is not rare. It's just made scarce by the fact that people just don't put the record from their collection on auction platforms and all that. It's the only reason why For You is like a $75 album full about buying records of which the price is not firmly established yet. And if you have to choose between buying an album that has only become very recently popular, I'm thinking mostly of albums that people talk about right now, albums of which the videos on YouTube are getting more and more recommended, you should try to avoid those albums and instead focus on the albums that perhaps you have known for a while and that are not as talked about as they used to be. Those albums that are having a stable price are a better thing to go for than the albums that are currently rising in price. Just a quick note about this copy of Still Way, which is pretty interesting. If you're still watching 15 minutes into the video, it does have, it is a promo copy of the album, and that is something I have never seen before, to be honest. So just thought that was pretty cool, and this is the kind of thing that drives organic demand for this kind of item. Things that make your item unique are things that are good investments for the future. And I'm saying investment in a very liberal way. Of course, it's not a good idea to consider those records as any kind of investment. It's much better to just invest in the stock market. But there is truth in the fact that you want to make the best, as much of an informed decision as possible when buying your records. And currently in 2020, in a period where albums like that are extremely popular and are rising in price, I think it's more important to look at the broader picture and to say, what are the albums that have truly unique music inside, albums that have genuine organic growth and that were popular even before the boom of CD pop and the Hiroshi Yoshimura rise to fame. Those kind of albums are the ones you should be really paying attention to, and those are the ones I'm sure will still be valuable in 20 years, no matter how many times you press them. I know that is a lot to process, but I really want to say at the end of this video that we are in a very good market for vinyl records currently. Compared to other collectibles, the demand is much more organic, and every day on Reddit I'm seeing a new post of someone buying a record of CD pop. I don't remember seeing that kind of post 3-4 years ago. And I think that's very good. It means that people are moving on from the phase of listening to the phase of buying, but the demand is purely organic. You don't see people saying, yeah, I just bought, I don't know, scenery for $2,000 because it's a great investment, it will only go up. There isn't that kind of mentality yet. And to me, that is a good sign that we are not yet in the phase of prices going completely crazy. And I hope that we will never have to deal with something like that. But if we do, remember this video from today and don't hesitate to sell into the hype if ever that moment happens. In any case, hopefully we'll stay in a pretty calm market and pretty niche and give us all the opportunity to buy the records we love at affordable prices. Anyway, this was Where Japanese Sounds. As always, let me know what you thought. Don't hesitate to leave a like or to subscribe if you like the content and want to see more. And until next time, stay tuned.